Here's a nice little placard about the mill. It says, remaking the mill. When the Forest Preserve District acquired Graue Mill in 1933, boards covered the windows and door. Exterior bricks were crumbling and the mill's machinery no longer worked. In 1934, the Forest Preserve District decided to restore the mill to its mid-1800s operations. Men of Civilian Conservation Corps Camp B-1668, which was based here at Fullersburg Woods Forest Preserve, replaced the windows and doors, cleaned out the interior, and built a new mill race and dam. The CCC also drafted plans for the construction of mill machinery, including wooden gears and new water wheel. Today, the mill is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and operates as a museum mid-April through mid-November, introducing visitors to mills and their influence on the area's culture between 1850 and 1860. Okay, on this side of the plaque it says President Roosevelt had established the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Depression to give work to the countless unemployed. Graues had by this time sold the mill property, and the CCC boys worked at reconstructing the mill race, the wheel, and the dam. The CCC boys were a constant topic of conversation in Grandma's living room. And this was written by Joan Keller, great-granddaughter of Frederick Graue. Graue is the gentleman who built this. And picture of one, picture of another, and it says Graue Mill before the left one, which is that. Looks all run down, and then after it was all rebuilt on the right, repairs by the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. So come on along inside, we'll take a walk around. And here's the stairs. Here's the entrance sign. Welcome to Graue Mill, free entry, looking for cornmeal. And this is the first floor of the museum. Ooh. Are these the stuff they like grinded up all the different mills and stuff? Like grains?
Yeah.
Yep. I thought so.
Gristmill or grain mill.
Yeah. Very interesting.
1852, so.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, we gotta turn on.
This is so cool.
I'm glad you like it.
A man's hand. By studying the tools on this floor, The visitor can begin to develop a better understanding of the earlier settlers in the Midwest who made their tools as well as used them. The old handmade tools often had designs that made them examples of fine art, the tools that converted bark-covered logs into homes and barns.
Sleds. These heavy wooden sleds were not made for sledding, but rather to carry things like heavy milk cans or firewood between the barn and the house during the winter when the ground was covered in snow. And then over the river and through the woods. The sleigh was dependable transportation during the winter when the ground was covered in snow. The sleigh was owned by Dr. J.B. Hench, an early area MD who used to make house calls. On the floor of the front seat is a hot water bottle or a foot warmer. Which would be that, which is cool. And other info on here too. High wheeler. The bicycle circa 1865 on the wall was known as a high wheeler or bone shaker because the wooden wheels caused the rider to bounce up and down with the bumps in the road.
I don't work for Costco.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
They outsource it to somebody else.
Yes, it's they
Nice
say that
little,
Costco doesn't
like,
follow
spinning wheels.
But I think it's right.
Oh, you think this is
You know what it would look like after it was
So they
spun.
could pay less?
Welcome to our barn exhibit. These rustic buildings represent a time when people led simpler lifestyles. There were many chores to be done in the barn, such as repairing tools, shearing sheep, and husking corn. Most barns had 2 floors. Animals, wagons, tools, and other equipment were kept on the first floor. Straw and hay were stored on the second floor. An important requirement for a barn was the door. It had to be large enough to let wagons, such as the one on display, pass through. If a large door was on hinges, a large amount of room was required to swing it open. The solution was a steel strip above the opening and wheels on the door that fit over the strip.
Here's going to the 3rd floor.
Yeah, but not in my house.
This is the 3rd level of the Mill Museum. And some of the stuff. Introduction to the 3rd floor. Graue Mill was completed by Frederick Graue in 1852 and was a functioning grist mill meant to grind corn, wheat, and other grains. While this area is staged, please note that nearly all the objects here are historical artifacts circa 1852 to 1890, and that we ask you not to touch or move them, which is fair enough. Milk glass. Dresser is a covered dish made from milk glass, which was popular in the United States between 1870 and 1880. Named milk glass because it resembled milk It also can be produced in blue, green, purple, and black. Chocolate milk glass was never made. The white color was obtained by adding tin to the glass making process. It intended to look like porcelain, but was much cheaper to produce. Most children in the 1850s didn't have their own room. They might have slept in a trundle bed that tucked under their parents' bed during the day, or maybe they shared a room with their brothers and sisters. You can see this room only has one bed, so there is no sharing yet. Frederick Graue's granddaughter remembers, "Oh, the upstairs we had one room, one great big long room, just as wide as the house was, and that was where the hired men slept. And then on the south side, there was where my folks' bedroom, a great big bedroom, and ours, the girls, that was west, and that was for my sister Libby and I." Interview with Mathilda Graue, 1884 to 1977. Fullersburg School. A nice picture. And then it says, "Keeping busy. When children weren't in school, they had plenty of work to do on the farm. The boys helped plow the fields, plant crops, take care of horses, and they might even go out to hunt. Cows were let into the pasture to graze during the day, and an important job for the boys was to be sure the cows were brought back into the barn at night. If left in the pasture, the predators might get them. Not all chores were a hard sell. Berry picking in the summer was a fun pastime where the kids could eat as they picked them. Fishing was fun and offered opportunities to swim and cool off during the summer, and to provide something different for dinner." But yep, this is kids' bedroom. And then up on the far end of the kids' bedroom, invalid feeder. In Victorian times, if you were ill, you were fed only liquid or semi-soft foods like beef tea, barley water, toast, and water or gruel. These foods were placed in an invalid feeder like one on the dresser, and the spout was then placed on the person's mouth. And then recipe for beef tea: cut 1 pound into small pieces like dice, put in a common preserve jar, and keep near the heat all night or a day and a night until all the juice of the meat has been extracted. Add boiling water to the juice and season very lightly. No wonder it could sometimes take a while to recover from simple cold. And I'm assuming it's that jar in the back that they're talking about. And here's another room. Etsy pump organ. A pump organ is a version of a reed organ in which the player makes the sound by pumping pedals to push air through the reeds. Our pump organ was built by the Etsy Organ Company around 1891. It is a 6-octave organ with 9 stops and originally sold for $265. The organ made of quartered oak and originally had red waterfall taffeta fabric in the openwork. In 1898, Jean and Otto Van Horn purchased the used organ for $80 for their 4-year-old daughter, Louise. Louise played organ many years until poor eyesight forced her to give up music. And then in the 1940s, the organ was repaired in the owner's home. After many days' work, Louise complained that the repairman had installed the wrong parts, 5th octave instead of 6th, which affected the keys and at the extreme end. The organ was donated to Graue Mill Museum in 1987 by Louise Van Horn's daughter and still works today. The organ. And then parlor games. Parlor games were a very popular activity for children because they were usually played to entertain guests, and guests were always entertained in the best room in the house, the parlor. Some of these games, like charades, are still played today. Lookabout was the name of a popular game to play. The host shows everyone a little object. All the guests leave while the host hides. When they return, everyone looks for the item until they spot it. When they have spotted it, they sit down. The last one to find it loses. And then in here they're playing a game. Can you find the thimble hidden in the parlor? Kind of cool game. The parlor was considered more formal than our living room might be today. It was used to entertain guests and show off some of the collections families were starting. By mid-1850s, people had more free time. Many became enthusiastic collectors. Photographs, scrapbooks, stamps, and travel souvenirs were popular items to collect. And then, can you find any collections in this room? What other evidence can you find here for people entertain themselves before radio and television? Mathilda Graue, 1884 to 1977. Mathilda, Frederick Graue's granddaughter, helped her father at the mill. Everyone called her Tilly. When she was in her 80s, she was interviewed about her life in Fullersburg. Look for portions of the interview titled Frederick Graue's Granddaughter Remembers throughout the mill. Mathilda Tilly is third from the right in the Graue family photo, which is here. I love love seeing old pictures like this, especially when it's like history stuff. Can you find stereoscope? This wooden device lets you see three-dimensional pictures. Stereoscopes were a popular form of entertainment from the 1830s through the 1900s. Not only was the 3D effect fun, but it also involved looking at pictures from far-off places and exciting events. John Rogers designed the statue in the parlor depicting General Ulysses Grant, President Abraham Lincoln, and Secretary of War Edwin McMaster Stanton. More than 100,000 of his plaster storytelling statuettes, known as Rogers groups, were sold between 1860 and 1893. Rogers himself called his work stories in statuary, and his work depicts sentimental Victorian themes, Civil War scenes, and popular figures in literature. And that would be that statue back here. Let me zoom in. And then medicine cabinet. The painted cabinet on the parlor wall held medicine and tonics. The cabinet was always locked, and the lady of the house often kept the key on her chatelaine, so only she could dispense the medicines. Some of the remedies that might have been in the cabinet were cod liver oil, laudanum, cocaine, and smelling salts or spirits of ammonia. And on to the next room. And a little case in here of books, little Lincoln logs, nice window with general store here, which I'll get to. But chores after school, and then for families on a farm, the animals needed to be taken care of again in the afternoon, so the boys spread fresh straw in the stalls and a bunch of other information. Rules and punishment. Common rules at the schoolhouse included the kitchen. People spent a lot of time in the kitchen. It was the warmest place in the house. The cast iron stove not only cooked food but also heated the house, making it cozy. The kitchens of the 1850s are very different from those we have today. They don't have sinks with running water, refrigerators, or electric stoves. That didn't mean they weren't able to cook or clean. Water was carried from wells. Wood was chopped to run stoves. Ice could be harvested from creeks and lakes during the winter and stored in ice houses to be used in warmer months. Why don't we have an ice box? Ice boxes were invented 1802 to 1803. They start become more available in the 1840s. Daily chores. In the 1850s, children were often expected to do many more chores than children do today. On farms, children started their mornings with milking cows, cleaning animal pens, and feeding the animals. Churning butter isn't a hard job, but it did take a long time. Just some of the different jobs for kids. Frederick Graue, granddaughter, remembers. What I hated to do was peel potatoes, because when there are 5 men, see, there were all these hired men and my father, and then of course my brothers. They were smaller yet, but they all loved potatoes, and I had to peel almost half a bushel. And finally, Grandpa Strukel, that was my mother's father, when my grandmother died, he lived with us, and then he said, "Tilly, you don't have to peel potatoes anymore. I'll do the peeling." So Grandpa took that off my hands, and he really did. Spinning. Spinning is how you make thread or yarn. To spin, you twist wool, flax, or cotton fibers into yarn. It's a simple idea, but takes a lot of practice to get even smooth yarn. The tall wheel is a wool wheel. The spinner walks backwards, pulling the wool fibers, turning the wheel. This spins the fibers into yarn. Then she walks forward, turning the wheel again. This makes the yarn wind into spindle. She might walk many miles in one day, half of them backwards. And that would be that. And this one too. For the smaller spinning wheels. Find the smaller spinning wheels. These are called flax wheels. Although you can spin wool or any other fiber onto them. To use them, the spinner sits down, which is much more comfortable. And the other smaller spinner. Cool. A clock reel spins on its own. A niddy-daddy is a handheld spinner. Either one will help stretch the yarn and measure it. You can find the clock reel and niddy-daddy in this room. Fullersburg first teacher. Fullersburg lacked a schoolhouse until the 1850s. Until one was constructed, Mary Fuller acted as a traveling school teacher. It was said that she was always accompanied by her two dogs, Pedro and Nero, who protected her from wolves on the roads. Traveling teachers would sometimes live at the homes of students they were teaching until it was time to move on. And then a one-room schoolhouse was established in 1863. According to local historian Hugh Duggan, this school was located at the foot of the Cemetery Hill on Ogden Avenue, just north of Fullersburg Cemetery. Since there was only one room and one teacher, children from grades 1 through 8 would all be taught in the same room. The older students might be asked to help each other or help teach the younger ones. It wasn't impossible for the teacher to be younger than some of their students. And then rules and punishment. Common rules at the schoolhouse included sit still, do not interrupt the teacher or talk out of turn, do not lie, girls and boys must sit separately and do not play together, use only your right hand to write, do not leave the classroom without permission. Punishment for breaking rules, flogging, caning, and other forms of corporal punishment, holding a heavy book with one's arm extended for a long period of time, forced to wear a dunce cap, the teacher marking the chalkboard with a dot, and the student having to hold their nose up to the dot, standing on their tiptoes. And then after school chores. So more or less the kids had to do before school chores and after school chores. And that was just essentially making sure that the farm was cleaned up, like farm animals put back in their stalls and barns and fed. It says for families on a farm, the animals needed to be taken care of again in the afternoons. So the boys spread fresh straw in the straws, fed the animals, and milked the cows. Soon it was time for dinner. As mentioned earlier, girls often helped in the kitchen, though if you find the quote from Mathilda Graue, you'll notice that everyone tended to pitch in. And then after dinner, the family would gather by the fireplace or the cast iron stove. Farmer might whittle a new handle for the axe, while the wife would mend clothes or braid a new rug. Children might clean fleece that needed to be picked and carded, and spun wool needed to be made into skins and more little stuff. So very interesting. Nice old-time bench. And we're coming into the post office, I think, or general store. cheese press, which was used to remove unwanted moisture from different things. And a picture of the old general store. The general store. People did almost all of their shopping at their local general store. It was also a great place to exchange news and gossip, and more little stuff. By the 1850s and certainly by the 1870s, there were post offices, town offices, and newspapers like the Chicago Tribune were well established, so the need for the general store to do all of those things were no longer necessary. So modern times, like evolving. Coffee grinder, which would be that right there, that red thing in front of the window on the table. And it was a cast iron countertop coffee grinder and operated by hand. And then there was a rug beater, also called a carpet cleaner, is used to clean carpets and rugs. You hang the rug over a laundry line or fence. And
Some old shit in here. There's the little guy's room. It is pretty cool.
Yeah, right.
We didn't come in here the last time we were here.
No, we did not.
No,
We
not at
went
all.
in that other thing.
How about this player, huh? Wow. I like visiting the old mansions. You went to the old.
well, that does it, everybody. That's my walkthrough. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And actually, next time I'm coming back, I will be making it through all 4 floors of the museum, because today I had to cut it short. When I do come back again, there is a little hiking trail, walking trail, whatever you want to call it, right along Salt Creek that's like behind the museum. So I do want to check that out and enjoy what the views of the trail is. So until next time, peace.